Alrighty, kia ora koutou everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Vicky. I'm from Tauiwi, Caucus, and I'm going to be in the background of today's webinar, and we'll jump back in to help with the Q&A in a little bit. I'm really excited about the next hour or so because this webinar is quite flexible and adaptable to the questions that you will all bring to our panelists, so we can really tap into what everyone's feeling and needing at the moment. It's worth noting that we have quite a mix of people and backgrounds in the audience today. We have people from the sexual violence sector as well as people like police and teachers. So I'm sure we'll have quite a variety of interests and questions. If the questions aren't going along the lines of your interests and your work, feel free to jump in and put yours in there, and we'll try to cover as much as we can in the next hour. A couple of housekeeping things. You're all welcome to use the chat box down the bottom to say hi to one another, to discuss what's being talked about, and to ask for help if you're having tech issues and that sort of thing. If you do have questions to put to the panelists today, if you could please use the Q&A box, then I can easily collect them and offer them to the panelists nice and easily. And you're welcome to start adding questions from now onwards. So enough of me. I would like to introduce you to our three wonderful panelists we have today. We have Sean Lyons, who is Netsafe's Director of Education and Engagement. He'll be taking the first bit to compare what the online landscape was like for mainly young people before COVID-19 and what they're starting to see now during the pandemic and what they consider best practice at the moment. Then we'll have Cara D and Nate, who will jump in to help answer all of your questions. Cara D works at Shine and is a national trainer and has lots of years of experience working with people who have experienced abuse. And Nate is a registered psychologist with expertise in treating those who have sexually offended and in psychology. So thank you all again for being here, and I'll hand it over to you, Sean.
Thank you, kia ora tātou. Real honour to be here today and to have the floor for a period to talk through what a young people's view of the online landscape is. For those of you who don't know who Netsafe are, shame on you, but no, seriously. The Netsafe is an independent, not-for-profit, non-government organisation. We are here to provide help, support and guidance for everybody in New Zealand, all New Zealand internet users, so that they can enjoy the benefits of the online space without experiencing the harm. And what that boils down to for a lot of people is there are a lot of people out there that think of the internet as a scary place, filled with scary people. Now, actually, maybe that's not fair. No, look, I'll go back to my first point. So people do believe that there's a lot of harm that goes on. And, you know, from our perspective, there is a lot of harm that goes on online. A lot of that harm is preventable. And that's a big part of what Netsafe's job is, to try and support people to make sure they don't experience harm whilst they use technology. But what I want to do this morning is give you a little bit of perspective from I guess from a young person's perspective, which is ironic, me being quite far from a young person, but certainly in terms of what we see young people's experience of the online space is. I want to start by just highlighting a quote that was once given to me at the end of a parent presentation by a 15-year-old in Auckland. My parents let me use a shotgun, but they won't let me use Facebook, which is alarming in a lot of senses. One, it was an urban Aucklander, and the idea of an urban Auckland using it shotgun always seemed a bit of a puzzle to me, but the idea that a shotgun would be a plausible tool for a 15-year-old to use, but Facebook wouldn't for those particular parents. But I think as you start to think on confidence and capability of parents, that then maybe you start to understand some of the rationale behind that. For a lot of parents, they feel like they are the last line of defense, the parental home guard for all the experiences that young people have. Certainly the bad experiences they have online, and I'm not always sure from our work with parents just how well prepared they feel to deal with that. In a survey that we did a little while ago, we asked parents how well prepared they were to deal with young people's online challenges. About 40% of them felt that they were prepared to, only about 40% thought they were capable enough to look after themselves. But when we asked them just how capable they were looking after their children, the number suddenly jumps to 80%. So you can see there's a difficult kind of dichotomy, if you like, between those two things. No, they don't know how to look after themselves, but yes, they're more than confident to look after the young people within their charge. What we have here is, I guess, a bit of a Doogie Howser situation, as I like to call it, and that might be showing my age in terms of that. I don't know how many people remember that show, but that was a program based on the idea that a 12-year-old was a brain surgeon, and people went to them to consult for issues around what was going on within their own brain. So, in difficult concept for me, I'm not sure how well or comfortable I'd feel with a 12-year-old brain surgeon. But we often hear stories like this about what young people can do and the technology that they use and how capable they are to use it. And although it's often, beguiling to watch young people using technology and how skillful they are, it kind of hides the truth a little bit around their own particular individual online safety. In a survey done a couple of years ago by the European Kids Online program, about 2/3 of the parents of 9 and 10-year-olds thought that those 9 and 10-year-olds knew more about technology in the home than they did. But conversely, the same number of 9 and 10-year-olds thought that their parents knew more about technology and safety than they did. So what we have in a lot of households, and no reason to think that households here are any different from the households done across Europe in this context, is we have a situation where everybody thinks that being safe online is somebody else's responsibility. There's a little bit of internal finger pointing going. If you put that alongside the kind of the sort of societal pressures or the societal attitudes towards the online space, people making grandiose quotes, albeit stand-up comedians, but making grandiose quotes about the importance or the significance of the internet. The picture that we're presented with in the media about the dangers of technology, the problems that young people experience when they're using online spaces, and then just massively unhelpful articles like this from somebody that I often think when I look at this picture that if anyone looks like a deluded narcissist, it's probably the man in that image. But then at the same time, what we've seen is a shifting pattern to ensure that technology is an important and vital part of young people's lives. So we see a bit of a problem in terms of the kind of push and pull around keeping young people safe and around their use of the online spaces. So what of the young people themselves and their attitudes? Well, from research by ourselves and by the Family Online Safety Institute in the US, most young people think that the online space, they feel safe there. It's a safe space. 84% of people from FOSI's research have properly secured their online presence. A large number have made posts that they later regretted. So in this piece of research, 43% admitted to having posted something online and later regretted it. But nearly 90% of those that have regretted it then took action to remove that content from online to reduce the harm to other people. There is a general feeling that things never get as bad online amongst young people as adults portray, so from our own research. And what we are seeing is a kind of a little sense of apathy toward the idea of online harm. Not that it doesn't happen, but more that it doesn't happen to the scale at which adults talk to them about it, and that includes, I guess, organisations like ours, digital citizenship or online safety programs in schools, or other public education that they come across with regards to online safety. One of the other strong pieces of feedback that we get from young people around that kind of safety or that preparedness for safety is that they often see suggestion advice that doesn't fit or that doesn't do what it is that they want to do. What they're looking for are practical tools where they can help themselves. They're not looking for someone to come in and intervene, but they're looking for support so that when they experience those challenges, they can fix them themselves and move on without necessarily escalating this beyond the level that they're comfortable with. One thing that is also really key to us or crucial to us in the work we have when we talk to young people about online safety incidents is the importance and the relevance of their peers, of their friends. They're still enormously important in terms of the first port of call for them when they experience online safety challenge. But they're also enormously significant when the challenges themselves come from their friends. So harm that's perpetrated by people within their own friend group are massively more impactful than any other form of harm that young people experience. So what we rationalise out of this is that there is quite a paradox going on for young people, especially for those that have a duty of care for those young people, be that in the home, in school, within the community. There's this kind of perception or desire that we want to keep young people safe. And to do that, we have to apply restriction, and with restriction comes less risk, and therefore kids are safer. But what we're actually finding is that this is a solution that was practiced, but is increasingly untenable. What we're actually looking for, what young people are looking for, and what we're seeing is possibly more successful is a model that says what we're not looking for is safer necessarily. What we're actually looking for is more capable. Increased capability comes from more opportunity. More opportunity does lead to more challenge, but that challenge is in turn what leads to that increased capability. Now, that requires, for a lot of people, a fairly significant leap of faith, because that model of, we want more capable, therefore you need to take more opportunities to get more challenges, not something you would suggest you would practice for, say, road safety or water safety. People don't want a little bit of an accident or a little bit of drowning. But in these cases, there is something that's missing from that diagram, and that's what that leap of faith is, that we require significant support for young people at the point that they experience those challenges, in order to turn those challenges into capability rather than those challenges into harm and other problems. So the issue with that is, where do young people get that support? How do we ensure that support is the right thing? Because if you think back to the idea about parents not able to support themselves, but yet feeling like they're able to support young people, that's then problematic. Surveys done by us in the last few years saying that half of all New Zealand teachers don't feel adequately or fully capable of supporting young people in the range of online safety needs that they have. So where does that support come from? How do we make sure that model is what we see, and that is what develops? And we know that many of us who are not young people have a very different view or a very different picture of technology than that of young people. So we have to take that into account as we're thinking about how we support those young people. Just going to flip through a couple of slides here. What we do know is that a lot of the traditional advice that we've provided to young people is possibly becoming increasingly out of step. For example, that idea that there are a lot of organisations, including ourselves, have perpetrated in the past the idea that technology should be kept in a central place where it can be viewed by all people, becomes increasingly untenable when you think about the way or the nature with which young people connect to the internet. The idea that what we need to seek out is a trusted adult. While that's still basically good advice, it's problematic for a couple of reasons. One, as I said before, we know that peers are probably the first port of call for young people. But secondly, and not to say that, I wouldn't trust Judy Bailey. Of course I do. The mother of the nation, of course I trust the woman. But you go to Judy Bailey, and I'm sure she'd be highly empathetic with your issue. But if she's not aware of how to support you, then all the trust and all the empathy in the world won't necessarily fix your problems, won't necessarily lead you to those solutions that young people are talking about requiring for themselves. So it's a bit of a grim picture that I paint there, in that, currently what we're asking them to do just isn't working, or not working effectively enough, as some of these kind of other homespun remedies are in the same position. Because we know that young people still have challenges, and it's not just the challenges that they have because they're online, that there are other challenges that people are often quick to blame technology for, but that we know that exist in their lives. So from various other pieces of research, Pew Internet that we've been keeping a track on over the last few years, the Technology and Friends research, young people are spending a third less time with their friends, 15% less likely to drive, say, for example, and 20% less likely to have a romantic partner than they would have done, say, 20 years ago. Now, again, that's not to say that necessarily technology is causing that, but this is the environment in which they find themselves. Also, that feelings of loneliness and depression are according to some commentators, are at an all-time high amongst young people. Again, people are quick to blame technology for this, and without any particular strong link to it, but certainly that's the perception of the societal understanding. So this is the kind of tightrope that young people walk, or that we walk as we try and support young people. And that doesn't take into account anything that's occurred in the lives of young people in the last 3.5 weeks, as the kind of paradigm for their schooling, their education, their social existence, their family lives have changed. So, what has that meant for us as online safety, as an online safety organisation? I should just make clear, so Netsafe is not only an education organisation, but also provides helpline assistance for online safety issues. We're an agency that functions under the Harmful Digital Communications Act. People can come to Netsafe with issues around harmful communication, and we will try and resolve those for them prior to them taking that action to court. So what we're seeing, or what we've seen, unfortunately, during this period, after a kind of quiet beginning to the lockdown, what we've seen is a slow and steady and distressing increase in just about every measure of harm that Netsafe follows. So unfortunately, everything is up. Unpleasantness is up across the board, and that means what we're seeing is an increase in harassment and bullying, a very marked increase in harassment and bullying that's going on between young people, familial harassment and bullying. Like I say, by all measures of what Netsafe is across, we're seeing a rise in those things. We're also seeing a rise in reports around child sexual abuse material, around attempts for grooming, around problematic sexting. In just about every capacity that we measure, we're seeing a rise in the numbers of individuals who are experiencing what to them is significant harm in their time online. Look, I don't think, I'm sure it won't have escaped anybody, the irony of the idea around stay home and stay safe. So we know, certainly from our work and from our experience over the years, that for many young people, school is a place of safety, and their time at school provides a safe haven from an awful lot of situations where they are troubled and where they may experience significant amounts of harm. So this shift to change what was a place of safety to something now that's encapsulated inside a place that they don't feel as safe necessarily is problematic. And again, we're seeing a rise in issues around abuse going on, or harmful behaviour certainly going on between members of the same family, people within the same bubble, which is obviously hugely problematic. And look, I say this with the caveat that Netsafe understands that we only see the tip of an iceberg, if you like. So we see those that come to us and want to report the issues that they're facing. The people that know that we exist, and that those are only the ones that are facing issues that have a significant online component. So, not to say that our measure is necessarily the be all and end all, but by comparison, and when we've spoken to other organisations that function in a similar space in other territories where lockdowns are in force, then we are seeing similar patterns in there, and that's, I guess, gives us enough confidence to assume that certainly it's not just a blip, not just a bubble for us in terms of the numbers. Excuse the misappropriation of the term, but it's certainly something that's very real in the lives of many young people, and actually not just young people, but all New Zealanders, certainly all New Zealand internet users. So what is it that we are asking people to do? Well, to be honest with you, I kind of grandiosely said when I was talking to about what this would be, that it was best practice. For us, it's the practice that we are suggesting, and it's not dissimilar to the practice that we've always suggested for those out there that might be experiencing harm online. That there are certain key things that individuals can do to try and reduce maybe not to prevent them from experiencing the challenge or the risk in the first place, but certainly to try and minimise the harm that's experienced. The first is that the speed at which people act is enormously important. So people often, when they experience harmful situations, certainly online, the natural reaction is possibly initially to say, hang on, no, stop, hopefully this will go away, this might resolve itself. Generally from our experience, that's not the case. Things don't necessarily resolve themselves well, and the faster that a person acts, the better, or the less harm it comes as part of that. Capturing evidence is an important part of that process where one experiences online harm. And again, the natural thing is to block and destroy or delete or run away from or not look at. And understanding that those things are natural reactions, but the capturing of screenshots or the capturing of URLs where things exist at a point in time becomes a valuable tool should anyone have breached legislation or terms and conditions which will help action be taken against those that choose to harm individuals. Don't engage. If it's possible, stay away. Don't feed the trolls, as the meme states. But engaging with people, again, often the temptation to straight away to get in, to try and reason, to be rational, or to respond and defend oneself is totally understandable. But generally, when people are motivated to cause harm to an individual, then that engagement or that response often leads to further harm and de-escalation, either in nature or in scale or in scope of what's going on in terms of that harm. Report, massively important thing, and often a step that surprisingly many people miss, even when they come to us. Report to the platforms in which you're experiencing those harms. There are very few reputable platforms that we share and that we work online with that don't have comprehensive abuse reporting facilities. Familiarise yourself with those and make sure you report them when you do experience that harm. Think ahead of time. Right now is a good time to review, or asking young people to review privacy and security settings to make sure they're not left open to that kind of abuse, that they lock down networks to those that they know and trust where that's feasible. And it goes along with the don't feed the trolls. Think very carefully about blocking, filtering, and ignoring the conversations that go up. Some of those blocks or filters may be temporary. People within your social circle that are causing you harm at the time, maybe you can freeze them out for a while, block them or snooze them, hide them, whatever the technology provides you the functionality to do. But certainly don't, if you can avoid it, or encourage young people to avoid continually watching the harm as it goes on without doing in any other action or taking any other action. Look, really, I guess the point I'm trying to make for young people is that, and I realize I have run over time, so I'm going to finish up really quickly. There are a range of options open to young people when they experience, and again, not just young people, all New Zealand internet users, when they start to experience harm. But at the time they experience harm, it's not always the right time to start to do the research and work out what that is. So if there's any piece of best practice for right now, while potentially individuals have some more time on their hands, is to start to think about what does that sort of toolkit, if you like, of support of their own practice look like if they do experience harm. Netsafe's about to release a toolkit for parents to help support them as they support young people at home. We've just updated our support for teachers at the Netsafe Schools website, both teachers and school-based guidance counsellors. We're open 7 days a week, 8 till 8 on all days but the weekend. We're here to provide support for New Zealanders to do just that, not just in a reactive way, although that service is obviously part of what we do, but also in a proactive way. If you're unsure, or if your young people are unsure, how to protect themselves ahead of time, and aren't comfortable talking to you, or you're not comfortable talking to those young people about it, then we're there to help with that too. So look, I'll wrap up there. Happy to take questions now or as part of the panel in a moment. But thank you very much for your time, and apologies for the speed at which those slides probably rolled through. And some of you may, if you were photosensitive, you may well be feeling like that was a little bit too much. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. That was great. We've got a few questions coming in. If you have any more, keep popping them in the Q&A box and we'll start to get to them. First up, we have one that says, how can we control, what am I saying? How can we role model ethical online behaviour that does not replicate the behaviour of those who sexually groom online? Who wants to take that one? Sounds like something that you might know about, Nate.
You're going to chuck that one to me. Interesting question. I'm not sure what the behaviour is, though, that people are talking about for grooming online. And it's kind of a bit open, that question. I think I need to know a little bit more about the question to be able to answer it. But, ethics would suggest things like consent, kind of best practice, treating people with respect, being aware of age and power differences, etc. Sorry, I can't really answer more than that without knowing a bit more about the question.
Yeah, that's fair. I suppose, are there any boundaries that adults and teachers and things like that can implement in their interactions with young people, especially during COVID-19, to make sure young people can differentiate between what's an appropriate dynamic and what's not? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it is difficult because you do need to balance between the idea of stranger danger and being careful of people that you don't know, but also being able to recognise and approach relevant authorities, like Sean was talking about, being able to kind of report behaviours to the right people. I think having a good chat with young people at the moment is a good idea, and warning them, that things are very different and that they should be very careful out there, and that having that clear communication open between parents or caregivers and the young people as well, so that they feel able to come and talk to you, is a really good start. Tara?
Yeah, I'll jump into that one. I think it's having conversations offline as well with children, and being curious when you approach those conversations and not go in with ideas about rules or frustrations that you have. And I know, particularly when we're looking at domestic violence, parents putting in parental monitoring software to find out what their kids are doing online. I think it's really important to have open conversations with children about that. Because if you're saying, if you're keeping it secret, or saying, I'm doing this because I care about you, it's not a far leap for them to take that message later on and say, well, if I care about someone, I'm going to monitor them online, which leads to problematic behavior when you're looking at intimate partner relationships. And I think instilling things like, I guess this is going a little bit different than grooming, but, what information do you share with other people online? Even things as like sharing passwords and things like that. It's kind of normalizing those messages early, because I know now, for myself anyways, like my partner probably knows more of my online passwords than I should admit, and that's probably not great role modeling for children. And then I remember at a Netsafe conference last year, there was a suggestion of narrative parenting. So when you're going online yourself as a parent, or as a teacher, I guess too, talking about what you're doing, what you're looking at online, how you're using different apps and things. So it gives the kids an idea of what you're doing, and they're not making assumptions assumptions about what you're doing, and it just keeps that transparency and openness offline as well as online.
If I can just add one thing, years ago from research, we found that if children think that losing their access to the internet or internet-capable technologies like games and things is part of their punishment for misbehaviour, they're going to be far less likely to report things online to their parents in case they get in trouble. So probably it's best to kind of leave internet technology access outside of your usual punishment selection chocolate box, and maybe not threaten kids, if you don't do the dishes, we're going to take away your internet. They should always be able to have the ability to come and talk to you about something without thinking it's going to result in them losing access. Otherwise, they're not going to come.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add to that I watched a news article, a piece on the news the other day about the amount of online dating that adults are doing. Almost the light-hearted fluff piece in the news at the moment. Those are opportunities, I guess, to talk to young people if they're watching those things with you, to have that conversation about consent and about coercion, because those for me are the important things here. Yes, young people will and do obviously interact online, that they will form relationships with people online. These things are becoming increasingly normal and less problematic. But the problem, when you talk about online grooming, is the point at which either young people believe that the things that are being asked to do, the images that are being asked to create, or the live practice that they're being asked to do is normal, or that if they feel like they don't want to do it, they shouldn't be pushed into doing it. And giving, I guess, young people from an increasingly young age, the ability to understand those two things and the license and agency to be able to say, no, that's not what I'm doing. That's not part of our relationship, becomes an increasingly important thing as young people get older. So I think having those conversations are vital.
We have another couple of questions coming through. How can we navigate the number of workers, parents, staff who can't have these conversations with our young people? So I'm not sure what they mean can't have. I don't know whether they feel uncomfortable about having these conversations. What advice would you give to those sorts of people? You sound comfortable. Yeah. People who feel uncomfortable having these conversations with young people, what advice would you give?
I might just jump in real quick. While I get it, just no longer. I'm afraid you can't. We can't be uncomfortable around this stuff in the same way we can't be uncomfortable around sexual health or domestic violence. We need to be able to have these uncomfortable conversations. Look, and I think part of that uncomfortableness comes from, obviously, it's a lack of confidence, but also a lack of capability. I think, we certainly encourage parents to jump in alongside young people in using the technology to understand. And if we're not engaging because of that fear of what it is, then the only way to get through that is to work out exactly what it is, to talk to young people about what it is that they're doing. But that obviously requires a degree of trust around the use of that online stuff, so that the earlier we start building that, the better. But right now it is a case of, I guess I understand and I empathize with those that don't feel comfortable, but we have to jump in now. Just start by talking to them about what it is that they do and what they do, what they would do should they come across situations that you might be concerned about.
And if I can jump in, I think take the pressure off yourself to be an expert. I mean, this good old Uncle Google is a great resource. And I think going in with that mindset of being curious about what do you do online, what are your fears about being online, what do you enjoy about it, is more important than going in feeling like you have to know all the answers and all the technicalities. I mean, Netsafe obviously is a great resource as well, and maybe that's something you can do with kids as well.
Yeah, I would probably also agree. Sorry, you still going, Cara?
Those resources.
Internet went a bit funny there.
Oh, good.
I think we got the main point.
Oh, no.
if I can jump in there as well, I kind of agree with what Sean was saying, that you have to become comfortable or find someone who's comfortable, because the internet will provide lots of people who are comfortable to talk to your children around sex and other such things. But there are a number of products as well in books, the Keeping Yourself Safe, Good Touching, Bad Touching, the Netsafe packages as well. Or, if you're aware of parents who are refusing to talk to their young people around these sort of things because they're not able, or there's a cultural or religious issue, get in touch with the school counsellors, school nurses. Oddly, or maybe not oddly, one of the most trusted people in schools, as reported by young people, are librarians. They have access to material as well. So I think you don't have to do it cold turkey. You can have some props to help you.
Okay, just a small pivot to address this question. It says, what are common controlling behaviours you are seeing in intimate partner violence, and how do we factor that in when offering support? Kara, that might be your specialty.
Yeah, I was glad to see that question there. I think the important thing to remember is that coercive control isn't going to change in the dynamics of COVID-19 and being in lockdown. What it does is it gives an excuse or a justification to tighten up that control or escalate the abuse. So if we look specifically at technology, what we know is that perpetrators often use technology to create fear, so sending threats through text message or email, for example, to punish and humiliate. So we see things like image-based abuse, or what people sometimes call revenge porn. They might create fake accounts to communicate with the victim or their family members or friends, and create that sense of omnipresence. So they're always there, always watching. So that would be the monitoring and stalking behavior, which is quite common, in isolation. So a lot of limiting who you can be friends with on different social media apps, limiting communication. And one thing I was wondering about was isolating from news and reports and stuff like that. So maybe giving them information about, there is no help for you. All these organizations are shut down, and not allowing them to have access to media reports and information where they could reach out and get some support. So just more of that monitoring and stalking online behaviors, I think are common. So I think when it comes to working with people, making sure that we're asking about their tech use, not only the victims, but how the perpetrator's using tech. And if they've got kids, what are the kids doing online as well? I think it's important not to blame the victim or give unrealistic advice. You shouldn't have posted that. You shouldn't have told him your password. That's impossible for him to have that kind of information. You'd have to be an IT wizard to know how to do that. Or just turning your phone off. That's the real quick way to lose engagement. And I think knowing the costs and benefits of different safety options that you're offering is really important. And what are the priorities for the person that you're working with? So, if you're telling people to delete their web browser history so that someone can't track what websites they've been on, that will probably alert them that the victim's onto them. So it's really important to give them the heads up so they know what information could go where. I think some of the key messages for adult victims of abuse are, reinforcing that what's going on isn't their fault. Trust your instincts. Look for patterns in what the perpetrator knows about who you're talking to or what you're doing online. And that could help narrow it down. Like, is it particular devices or particular applications that they're using? Because quite often what we know about perpetrators is that in order to maintain the control, they'll be giving some hints that I know what you're doing. And Was kind of what Sean was talking about in the presentation as well, collecting evidence and storing that somewhere safely. And the secondary benefit to collecting evidence, so I'm talking about screenshots or what's going on, can be important. And the secondary benefit to that is you have something to reflect on later, to remember events correctly, because often perpetrators will try to say, that never happened, or you're remembering it the wrong way. So then, keeping that evidence kind of helps keep you sane as well. If someone's separated, so it's an ex-partner who might be abusive, and the bubbles are overlapping because of shared custody of children, keeping an eye on what devices children are bringing back and forth to each bubble, and seeing what information could be shared in that regard. And I think in particular, when we're working with people who might have disabilities, if you're relying on assistive technology to enable your participation in a world that might otherwise be inaccessible, there's some extra vulnerability in that. I'm talking a lot. I guess the last thing I'll say, in terms of when people are seeking support, maybe going to the health services or mental health services, is for professionals not to assume that stress and anxiety is purely related to lockdown and fears around COVID-19. And it might also be worth considering who is in the home and what behavior is happening there, and how might that be contributing to an increase in distress or even health issues. We know the impact of living in a stressful environment is quite significant on people's immune systems and things like that. So just for professionals to consider violence as well. I'll leave it there.
No, that's great. Priscilla has just added, I think practitioners should also know their limits and get help if they don't have the expertise or knowledge, as they could do more harm than good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good point. What else do we have? Somebody has asked how teachers can protect themselves when in small groups of online meetings with children. Anyone have anything to say to that one?
We've certainly come across that a couple of times in the last few weeks. I think obviously it is an issue. We're now, when we think about the distance learning, and we look at one practitioner perhaps and 20 or 30 kids doing a session much like this. There's a lot of oversight, and maybe people worry less. A lot of us have been talking to us about that idea of where you need to speak directly to one student, or one student wants to contact you to talk about something they don't understand, that they don't necessarily want to raise in that same forum. And obviously, yes, potentially there is some kind of increased risk. I was a teacher years ago, and I remember being told at Teachers College that I was never to be in a room on my own with the student at any time. And that was advice that was, bandied around at that point. And while I don't know that that's necessarily feasible or plausible or even the right advice, I think certainly if people feel able to, then asking young people to have another family member present during that, at least in the background, or having another colleague present, or trying to put together maybe not individual groups but smaller groups where there are a range of students in it to talk about a specific issue. But obviously there will be pastoral care issues where that's not an appropriate thing, and I think don't want to always be sounding like the one that puts demand on parents, and understand how difficult things are for parents around these times. But I think where that is, where that's a concern, or where individual teachers as practitioners have a concern, then they should try and involve another adult from the home in that discussion if it's possible.
Yeah, I agree with what Sean was saying. Also, I think it's important to preserve the offline power structures online. So if you're called Mr. or Ms. such and such in the classroom, that's the name that you use online as well. You don't encourage a more casual or informal or less respectful kind of interaction. And just because you're interacting with them, again, doesn't mean that it's your responsibility to answer their personal questions. Flick them to the school counsellor if that's what you would do in a normal situation in the class, or a senior teacher or a headmaster or a nurse, etc. Try and keep it as much like the classroom as possible.
Some real-time feedback for you. It's a good answer, thanks. So there you go. Cool. Next up we have, we're currently experiencing having a significant number of younger primary school-aged kids navigating distance learning. This age group has traditionally not had as much access online as older young people. Primary schools are suggesting all sorts of wonderful links for learning, but we have not received key messages and guidelines about fish hooks to look out for, e.g. messaging functions within apps and games. Are there any resources for parents of younger children or teachers, I suppose, that they can utilise?
Yes, that there are. So look, at Netsafe, mentioned right at the end, today, hopefully, fingers crossed, we are releasing a revamped sort of parents toolkit that helps support parents that find themselves in these situations. There are specific details in there about sort of apps, games, technologies that people would use, and specific advice and guidance around strategies that might be used with younger children as well as older ones. So I think that the true that there are young people that will be using way more technology now than they have done in the past. But I think even whether it was small amounts of technological access, the fish hooks and the rules, if you like, are pretty much the same. That a lot of problems arise with unfettered access for the very young. So I was there myself when my kids were very young. The temptation to grab 5 or 10 minutes to do something and make Bob the Builder stand in for you during that time is obviously hugely tempting. I'm showing my age by referencing Bob the Builder again. But those kinds of the problems that can arise should those technologies be more interactive than somebody is aware of are the problem. So, again, I think back to my youngest kids, their use of Club Penguin, which looked like a wonderful technology provided by Disney Corporation. How could anything possibly go wrong? But, certainly in my time at Netsafe, I realized that Club Penguin wasn't quite as safe and innocent as we thought it was, and I think is no longer functioning. So it is about not understanding that people want to use technology in some way to say, here's the technology, there you go, use it. It's not taking the foot off in terms of the oversight and the understanding and the knowledge. It comes down to that confidence and capability. I think it comes down to jumping in and making sure that even if someone sends you a link from a reputable source and says you should try this for your kids, it might be great and that's fantastic, but the first thing that you need to do is check that yourself, is make sure that before you just click on the link and say, here you go, small child, I hear this is brilliant. It's go through and use it yourself and make sure it is brilliant. And then if you can, take that 5 minutes, take whatever it is, that time that you need to step back, but do it now knowing exactly what it is your young people are doing rather than just assuming it's good because someone said it was good.
And Miriam has just asked Sean, is Hector's World still available through Netsafe?
Unfortunately, Hector's World is based on a technology called Flash that's no longer supported across the net, and many security analysts would tell you was the whole of all sorts of terrible security problems. So I'm afraid it's not as a resource, but we do have resources for parents. We do have resources for young people on the website. They're just not swimming mammals anymore.
Disappointing, but it's all right.
Yeah, it is. For me too. Loved Hector.
Got quite a different question here. Please address online safety when working with interpreters. Does anyone have any insights on that one?
I think you have to be very careful when you're using an interpreter in any situation. You know, that you have to be sure that they are interpreting word for word and not kind of translating concepts into what they think should be said. They need to be reputable, qualified, you know, and also signed up with some kind of confidentiality agreement as well. And go for someone who's kind of tried and tested. I unfortunately heard too many experiences of people realizing that the interpreter was actually putting their own slant on things and kind of, you know, changing answers and things as well. So yeah, I think get all that sewn up beforehand. I'm not sure where you get information on interpreters from, but at least try and find one that's been used before and is respected and trusted.
And I guess just the general tech safety as well. So making sure if they're going to be working on like Skype or something, who else is around? Can the conversation be recorded? Well, you know, are they using personal devices? How's that information, like contact information, things like that, being saved or not saved? So just those kinds of considerations, perhaps as well.
Okay. Now, Sean, we've got a question that says we are increasingly using Zoom and other telehealth tools to engage with clients during COVID-19. I'm interested in safety and privacy in an online world. I anticipate we will continue using telehealth tools after COVID-19 as a new normal. Do you have any advice on Zoom, technology, privacy, all of that sort of stuff?
Look, there's certainly an awful lot of heated discussion around individual applications, and you know there was a crazy time a couple of weeks ago where there were accusations flying around the insecurity of one platform versus the other, and one platform was blaming the other platform for creating the rumor, and people putting bounties out to, you know, there's a lot of, and I get the idea of people, you know, people's desire and concern around the platforms. Look, I don't know if there's a definitive answer. I wish there was a platform I could say you would use that. I wish there was a platform I could have created and then said you could have used it, and then I'd be a very wealthy man. I think, look, some of the important points to consider are, you know, the degree to which the conversation is lockable, especially in this context. So, how do you publish the conversation to the individual? Is it point to point? Can you guarantee that it's point to point? How can the person hosting it observe who else might be in it? I know that Zoom has a feature to lock a room once you're in it. Other platforms have similar tools. Is it fully encrypted? So there are some services that offer what they call end-to-end encryption, which means that to answer the question quickly, point to point means that I'm one point right now, and you can all see me by the magic of technology. It's translating itself down the internet and getting to you. Now, if this is not encrypted, if this conversation isn't encrypted, then somebody with a particular set of skills, to paraphrase Liam Neeson too much, can come in on that line and potentially break that open and see directly without any kind of other particular tool, can see what's going on, can intercept, if you like bugging used to be on phone lines. The point-to-point encryption thing means that there's a technology on your machine and at the other end that encrypts that, and means that even if they break into the line, they can't necessarily see it. Now, there's a little E in the top left-hand corner of the Zoom button that says this client is encrypted. So there is a degree of encryption. Now, I'm not entirely sure whether that's at all points across Zoom's line, and then that's one of the criticisms some people have had of Zoom. So organizations like WhatsApp have been very clear in saying that their connection is end-to-end encrypted, and so is things like Facebook Messenger, also end-to-end encryption. Things like Signal, there are many others, and I know there are specific telehealth applications out there that do the same. The truth is, you need to, before before you engage with that technology, if that degree of oversight is a problem, you need to check, and that needs to be one of the questions that you ask of that technology by going through, checking with services like ourselves, or checking the terms and conditions of what these services do. But that needs to be a question that you ask yourself, and make sure you are confident with the answer before you engage with that particular technology.
Yeah, I can just add, because telehealth has been around for a long time. I've been seeing clients online for years. Check with the professional body that you're with, see if they have any guidelines around that, best practice guidelines. New Zealand Psychology Board has said at the moment that Zoom appears to be as secure as we can expect. And as Sean said, that you lock the room when people are in, you use a password agreement for people to come in, etc. There are some other online platforms, there's CoView, DoxyMe, etc. Again, but check back with your professional body, or give them a bit of an oomph and ask them to actually come out with some best practice guidelines. But this has been around for quite a while, and it is definitely going to be very popular from now on.
Up in the year while we get used to all the different platforms. We're just starting to get used to Zoom, so if it's not good, then God help us. Cool, and the one from Tim looks really good. For those educators and teachers providing education online, how can they work to increase safety for the young people in those spaces, taking into account that for some students their home may not be the safest space for a number of reasons? What do you think?
Yeah, I'll start off for that one. I guess it's just like we tell people who are experiencing abuse, maybe for teachers as well, trust your instincts. Hopefully you'll have somewhat of a relationship with them from being in the classroom beforehand. So kind of knowing what signs to watch out for if there's students who seem to be particularly tired or disruptive or have a hard time concentrating. There might be signs that something's not going on so well at home. So trust that. Be willing to have conversations that might be difficult. And if you're worried about like child protection or child abuse, definitely reach out to your child protection lead at the school, consult with people, and find out what processes might you need to follow in that regard. Yeah, I know at Shine, I'll do a little plug. We have a program called Shine in School that can help teachers with those kinds of conversations and know what to do. So you can always email shineinschool@2shine.org.nz if you do have some questions about how to have those kinds of conversations and what things to look out for.
Anyone else on that one?
Anything to add to that?
Good. I'm not sure what this last one, it says, do panelists have a concern about young people year 11 and above continuing to be at home in level 3? I have concerns about the potential harm for them from online sources alongside not being able to have regular in-person social contact with their peers. Not being considered enough for new governmental guidelines. I've received feedback from my clients who are in this age group that they are feeling quite distressed by being left out of being able to go back to school in level 3. I'm not sure what the question is in there. I suppose just not having regular in-person contact, is that what they're getting at with that one?
I think the answer is yes, we are concerned. We're concerned for everybody in the lockdown. I'm concerned for my own mental health in this lockdown. Yeah, there are some people who are really enjoying the lockdown. Quite a few clients I've spoken to, quite a few young people are really enjoying the lockdown, being in their bubble, in their rooms, being online. I think it's kind of a sound message for all of us to try and keep networked, keep talking to people, get some off-screen time as well. Talk to people in your bubble. Communicate in any way that you can. Even if it's shouting over the fence if you have to. I think that goes for all people. I think young people generally will probably be better at this in some ways than definitely I am.
Okay, so we've just hit the 11 o'clock mark and we've gotten to everyone's questions, which is amazing. So we'll probably look to close about there. If anyone does have any other questions, I'm sure you're welcome to contact Netsafe or Shine, Tauiwi, or any local sexual violence service that you have, domestic violence, family violence, anything like that. And thank you so much, Sean, Karadee, and Nate. We really, really appreciate your precious time. So thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you to everyone in the audience for sticking with us and for turning up today on your Friday. So yeah, happy Friday. I hope you all get some rest over the weekend. And yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.